Welcome to Legacy Magazine Presents Lunch with Legacy Leaders, a weekly talk show that interviews national and local thought leaders on issues impacting the South Florida Black community. Now introducing our host, Chris Norwood.
Greetings. Once again, we are here with Lunch with Legacy Leaders. I am your host today, Christopher Norwood. Today's show is going to be very informative given today's current events. As we all know, Roe versus Wade has been a staple in our lives for the past 50 years, and that has now changed to some degree. And so we have a spirited group of ladies and practitioners who are going to educate us during this lunch hour. So grab your lunches, grab your salads, grab your coffee, and join us. Today's show is sponsored, as always, by Desmesman and Dover, FAMU, AARP, and the Florida Lottery. Our guests today, I'm just going to introduce them individually myself. Some of them you all will know. Some of them I've known for many, many years. We have Ms. Thema Campbell, the CEO of Girl Power Rocks. We have Sheena Rolle, the Senior Director of Strategy, Florida Rising. We have Shea Spencer, the CEO of YWCA of Palm Beach County. We have Kerry-Ann Royce, the CEO of YWCA South Florida. And we have the incomparable Yolanda Jackson, lawyer, lobbyist extraordinaire. We've all been paying attention to what's been going on, and I know our listeners have because they are informed people. But for those who don't know, recently on June 24th, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. The ruling upheld Mississippi's ban on abortion at 15 weeks of pregnancy. It overturned Roe versus Wade and ended the federal constitutional right to abortion in the United States. By overturning Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court erased nearly 50 years of precedent. They took away women's power to make their own personal medical decisions, and they gave that power to state lawmakers. This is Florida, and we have to be reminded that the previous president, who is now a Florida resident, he nominated 3 new Supreme Court justices who all voted in favor of overturning Roe, including Justice Barrett, who replaced Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the spear, the tip of the spear in women's rights in this country in the legal realm. He won Florida twice, and it was Florida, our state, our electoral college votes that gave him a landslide victory in 2016, and we cannot ever forget that. Elections have consequences. But the effect of this Supreme Court decision is going to have an enormous effect on Florida. The 10 states where 60% of African Americans reside are New York, California, Texas, Georgia, Illinois, North Carolina, Maryland, Michigan, Louisiana, and yes, Florida. 5 of these have 2 million Black folks, including Florida, New York, California, Texas, and Georgia. And so these are the states that are going to be enormously affected by this decision. I've been thinking about this conversation for some time. I've been spending some time overseas. I just got back yesterday, and the world community has really enlightened me in how they feel about this whole saga that we've experienced. I'm going to direct my first question to everyone to just please introduce yourself. And I'm going to start with Yolanda Jackson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm Yolanda Jackson, and I am a lawyer lobbyist at the Becker firm. I am here in my individual capacity, however. And so this is certainly a subject matter that is going to affect Black women. I don't know what your specific question is, but I can just tell you generally.
Just to introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I'm from Miami. lawyer, lobbyist, and very interested in this subject and glad to be here.
Absolutely. And then we're gonna go with my old friend Thema Campbell. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. Hi Chris, and hello everyone out there. I'm Thema Campbell. I am the president and CEO of Girl Power Rocks Inc. in Miami, Florida, and this is a subject that we talk about a lot at Girl Power because we work and serve with a lot of teenage girls who has some very strong opinions about this subject matter, and so glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And next I'm gonna ask Miss Spencer to introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Shea Spencer, CEO of YWCA of Palm Beach County, and our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And for more than a century, YWCA has advocated for the civil rights of marginalized communities. So I'm extremely, excited to be a part of this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have our friends from Florida Rising. I want to allow Miss Sheena to give her introduction.
Good afternoon. I am Sheena Rolle, Minister Sheena Rolle with Florida Rising. Florida Rising is a statewide community organizing independent political organization. We work directly with Black and Brown communities, and so we're particularly concerned about this because we know of the disproportionate impact it will have on our Black and Brown communities and families who are trying to create their own political realities. So happy to be here today.
And then finally, we have Miss Kerry-Ann Royce of the YWCA of South Florida. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having us. And you have a double whammy of YWCAs today in Florida representing for you. So Kerry-Ann Royce, as you mentioned, President CEO, proud President CEO of YWCA South Florida. We're also a 100-plus-year-old mission eliminating racism and empowering women. We operate in the Miami-Dade and Broward County region. And therefore, this topic is a very critical one for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And so let's get right into it, ladies. I'm really here just to direct traffic. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Spencer. Let's talk for a moment. What exactly is Roe v. Wade, and how do we get to this point?
Yes, thank you, Chris, for your question. And in short, Roe v. Wade is a landmark case that really set the precedent for women's rights and her ability to choose if abortion is right for her life, and right for her family. 5 decades ago, the U.S. Supreme Court legalized abortions in all 50 states and ultimately ruled that the 14th Amendment protected the fundamental rights of a woman's ability to have an abortion should she choose to do that. And it also ruled that the courts could not and should not take that away. 50 years ago, YWCA of Palm Beach County stood by that ruling, and we do today. We still do today. So it's quite troublesome to see that we're here today. It's almost like a time capsule, as if we're going back in time and really impeding on the privacy and the rights of women for something that is ultimately so significant and should really not rest in the hands of anyone else except for that woman. How we got here today is it's simple, I think, but also very scary. From my perspective, what we see is an imbalance of political power. We see that lawmakers are continuously pushing their personal preferences. We have lawmakers who want to see their religious and moral beliefs permeated throughout the country, and they continue to push those beliefs, although millions oppose. We're deeply concerned as an organization, and I can't even begin to explain what the implications will have not only on our community as Black and Brown people, but on women across the United States.
So just as a follow-up, so this is the YWCA as your particular organization, your particular regional organization has taken an official position as relates to Roe v. Wade. Is that something the national has done as well?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Kerry-Ann and I just attended a national conference in Chicago for YWCA, and we have nearly 200 YWCAs in the United States, and we remain steadfast that this is something that we do not stand by we are collaborating as an organization and working towards our next steps to fight this ultimately. So this is something that we stand by on the local level as well as on the national level.
Well, that's good to know. I never knew that, and that leads us into a question for Miss Royce with the YMCA of South Florida.
YW.
YW.
Chris,
it's a W that makes a difference, Chris. It's a
Chris, listen, before we leave this question, I would like to add one additional thing to what Shea spoke about as far as why we're here today. From where I sit, we're also here because there is a group of white men in this country who feel as if they have the right to tell all of us what to do. And especially if you're Black or brown or you're a woman, from the beginning of our history here, white men have always felt like they have the right to tell women what we can and cannot do with our bodies. And so I just want to make sure that we know that these people been doing this from the beginning of our history here in this country. They believe in their hearts, and we have to put a stop to it. I don't know how we're going to do it, but there's a group of white men who believe that it is their right to tell all of us what we can and cannot do, because they like that right belongs to them and them alone.
Ms. Royce, go ahead.
To Thema's point, 86% of Americans do not feel the way that this vote has occurred. 86% of Americans believe in some right to this choice. It's only 8% who vehemently think no abortion should be allowed. Only 8% of Americans feel that way. So the fact that there is a massive underrepresentation of the American voice is incredibly troubling, and how we got there today is certainly a systemic issue.
Well, thank you very much, Thema, for those additional comments. And I want to apologize for not putting the W in YWCA, because without that, it's a totally different organization. And I'm going to apologize in the future for any other error. And please just call me out. All right, call me out. I grew up in a household of women, so I'm not afraid of none of y'all. All right. But with that being said, I think I want to bring in Yolanda, Ms. Jackson, because, in Florida, we want to be clear and clarify for everybody what exactly is happening. As this Supreme Court has decided, we still have some laws that are coming into effect and have been in effect in Florida as relates to abortion. Is it my understanding, Yolanda, that on July 1st, there's a new law that will come into effect that will limit abortions will limit them to 15 weeks. There are laws in place that allow women in Florida to have abortion under whatever restriction they are. Please educate us, Yolanda.
So let's unpack it a little bit. I'm going to say that for the purposes of this discussion, we're going to call this reproductive justice. It's another social justice issue. It's exactly what it is.
Got it.
Because we start talking about abortion.
Hold up, say that again, Yolanda, just for those people who didn't catch it.
Reproductive justice, that's the topic. It's not just about abortion. As Thema pointed out, it's about protection of our own bodies and the ability to speak about our own bodies. So what the Supreme Court has done is put this power back into the states. And states like Florida now have a ban. 26 states with this decision could possibly, 13 already is illegal, but 13 more will join them. And then Florida, we believe, will be not too far behind. Right now, we have a 15-week ban, no exceptions for rape or incest. That's important. No exception for rape or incest. We thought that there was a possibility that we could have a special session because we're not only finished. We've had 2 special sessions already, but we think that politically, because of the numbers that Kerry-Ann put out there, that's not going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen in the future. Case in point, the sponsor of the abortion bill in the House is now going to the Senate unopposed, a woman. And so we expected this conversation to go long and wide in Florida. The other thing that I do want to point out, that you have states like Mississippi that have already proposed legislation that would prohibit things like IUDs. And so we are really talking about a justice issue. Whether or not you are a Christian right or a liberal left, it is still the same. And I'm going to leave you with this. I think one of the things as Black women we're going to have to distinguish is something that I had a conversation with my pastor on Sunday is, where is the Black church going to show up? Where is the Black church going to show up on this issue? How we're going to address it? We know that in our churches, all the deaconesses and the choir members are mainly women. And how we're going to show up, and it's important. And then the last thing I would say is that how are white women going to show up in this conversation? That's another issue. So there's lots of issues that we're going to address today, but those are ones that are front of mind. But yeah, Florida is there. And by the way, we don't have a vote on the board on whether or not there should be an exception for race-based incest. That's a whole nother issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so with that being said, we are entering into a new era, in Florida, and how this plays out in future legislatures and how they deal with it. I know the governor has mentioned that he's amenable to even more restrictions. I mean, we have to just be aware of these things. But getting back to Ms. Royce, I have a question for you. Is the overturning of Roe versus Wade a Black issue of concern to our community in particular?
Well, first of all, it's a women's issue. That's a first and foremost. It is a women's issue. And it is so much bigger than a women's issue because it's a family issue. It's an economic issue. It is a neighborhood issue. It permeates so much of our lives. But then when we go further and we look at that intersection of race and gender, we know that there is extensive, disproportionate impact to Black women and women of color, mainly because we know about the economic disparities that exist, the disparities of choice, the disparities of where you live, the disparities of access, the disparities of access to healthcare, even today, prior to the overturning of, last week, prior to the overturning of Roe versus Wade, we had Black women dying of diseases that they weren't getting at greater rates, but dying of them at greater rates. So what is to be said? What is to be said now in this situation where the choice is being taken from you when, even at 15 weeks, I know many women of means who didn't find out they were pregnant until much later, who at that point in time would then have no choice. So what will end up happening, because we know that there is a strong correlation between race and gender and economics, is that those with means, mostly white women, will be able to get on a plane and go where they need to go to take care of the choices that they should have. And then there will be an entire slew of women who will not have them. And then what will happen? Where's the conversation that we're having about healthcare? Because we know maternal child health is another drastic disproportionate issues where Black women are dying at 8 times the rate in childbirth than any other women. What's going to happen to preschools, where we know that access to high quality early education is already a strained environment, where we know of the underpaying and how much it costs to have children in childcare? What's going to happen to benefits and the benefits cliff? What's going to happen in so many ways that this now continues to cascade? We have to have a larger conversation, because this 15 week is happening. Roe versus Wade, it has been overturned, even though, is it permanent? Nothing's permanent, but it certainly is here, and it took 50 years for them to overturn it. It will probably take that much longer for us to reinstate something that is law. So it's really important for us to be talking about the impact to the Black community.
You mentioned several things. I just want to be very clear about how this is affecting the African American community. I think one you mentioned is healthcare access or maternal health access, meaning that women who perhaps are pregnant may not be able to have the proper healthcare access and may make a decision whether to have a child based upon that. And then you mentioned poverty, meaning that the poverty that exists overwhelmingly in African American communities may make a woman decide whether to have a child, make the decision more complicated than if they were not. And I think the third thing that I heard you say was, or maybe you didn't say it, or maybe I'm just implying it, is that people with money are going to find ways to have.
Oh, I said that.
Okay. And I just wanted to pull out those three things for the men who may be watching and may not be catching up too quick. Yeah. Does anyone like to?
Let
Yes,
me
ma'am.
just say one other thing. Kerry-Ann hit on a very important part. This goes beyond abortion. For example, we have young women now who are getting married younger or choose not to get married, and they're freezing their eggs. If life begins at inception, then they decide to do something with the eggs that they don't use, or they change their minds, then they could be in some states being putting themselves in a position of criminal conduct just because they're making a choice about where their eggs go. The other thing is that if you are a woman who has had a miscarriage, and sometimes during the miscarriage there are drugs that are used to I don't know the proper medical term, but they use that abortion type medicine. Those could be outlawed. You could really have your life in jeopardy. And those are the decisions, to Thema's point, that are being taken away from women. So it's not just that. Then the last part I'm going to say real quick. The other part that we have to talk about is Clarence Thomas's opinion. I want to make sure that we talk about what Clarence Thomas wrote, because if you think you're lonely now, wait until you read that opinion. It's like, it's really, the implications are now to even determine who you love.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead. I'll be quiet.
I'll also add to what Yolanda just said.
Well, hold on 1 second. Yolanda, tell us what Clarence said so we can learn. All of us may not have read it or summarized it, and then I'll get back to you, Miss Roy.
Very, 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 very quickly. Clarence Thomas, in a separate opinion, gave his opinion as to what's next. And basically, he said we need to do more. There are other things that are not enumerated in the Constitution. If it's not clear, then we need to opine on it, which has implications for same-sex marriage, which has implications of overruling loving, which he's in the interracial marriage, so without the interracial marriages, I mean, it goes pretty deep. And so it signals that the court is willing to go further. And on the day today, I just saw it, that Ketanji Brown Jackson is coming onto the court. Oh my God, it is going to be very interesting.
Miss Kerry-Ann.
Absolutely, and I think he's also looking at contraception, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he is. Yes, absolutely.
And the other thing to add to that, when we talk about, people who harvest their eggs in artificial insemination, what about in many cases of artificial insemination where women are struggling to have children, right? So if we were to talk about folks that, our right-leaning friends would love, are the folks who are out there trying to have babies. They want to have children. They oftentimes embed 4 embryos. And sometimes that doesn't all take. Sometimes all takes. And they have to, for their health and the health of their other fetuses or their other babies, they have to reduce the number of eggs that are in their uterus in order for that to take place. There is so many levels of complications in this conversation at that point, that are far reaching. far-reaching as they would fall under this abortion ban if they were to end that in certain states.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thema. I'm going to ask you a question directly, and then you could double back to your follow-up. Yeah, I got you. It's been said that the Black community uses abortion as a method of birth control. Whether that statement is true or not, it has been stated as some sort of myth. It's still a woman's prerogative. Where will women go now, especially those that are on public assistance for legal abortions?
So first of all, Chris, and everybody here and everybody that's listening, we have to start shutting down those negative narratives about Black people and about Black women, because it's a lie. I was looking at the research today, especially in Florida, Black women, Hispanic women, white women, it's the same across. Listen, Black women ain't having abortions at no higher rate than any other woman. And so we have to start shutting down those negative narratives about Black people and about Black women. Let's shut them down. Let's call people out. Let's call out our neighbors and our relatives and our friends when they're saying these negative things about us, because we have to shut them down. Black women are some of the most resilient, brilliant, smart women on the planet. And if it wasn't for Black women, I don't know where we would even be, because we get it right all the time. Black women get it right, and they need to be coming to us for advice on how to run the whole country and everything, because we get it right. Now, I'm gonna get off my soapbox on that, but those kinds of things really upset me when I hear these negative stereotypes about Black women and Black people that we keep repeating. And where are Black women and where Black people gonna get abortions? Listen, ain't nothing ever stopped Black women from doing what we need to do, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our families. We're going to find the money. We're going to find a way. We're going to get on a plane if we have to and go somewhere and get us the abortions that we want. But the other thing that I wanted to say before, when Kerry-Ann brought this up on the last question, is that it's going to take us a minute to get this thing reversed. And in the meantime, we have to start with a loud voice, the same voice that we are speaking out on this issue with. We need to use that same voice to educate our children, our boys and our girls, about how to be more careful with who they're engaging with and how they're engaging, and protecting themselves, okay, and abstinence and whatever it looks like, but to help us get past this particular period in our history, because it's called education. And we have to educate our girls, and we have to educate our community on what this means to us and how this is going to affect us. And we have to help them find legal ways to get abortions. And I'm sure there's agencies out there that's going to pop up to help women with little means to get these abortions, because there is rape and there is incest. And there will be women who need to have an abortion after 3.5 months. But I will say that for me, I'm a woman in my 60s. And 3.5 months to me is more than enough time for most of us to determine whether or not we need or want to have an abortion. And we should try. We should try to stay within those guidelines. Now, if something happened and we need an abortion outside of a 3.5 month period, then we have to know that there has to be something in place for that. But I want to say to us, even though I am so pro-choice, and I believe that, first of all, if you have a penis, you shouldn't even have a voice on this issue. Anybody with the penis, they just need to be quiet, because this is not about you, it's about me. And so, but with that said, there is some responsibility that we have to bear as women, no matter how young we are. And so we have to start teaching this to our girls at a very early age, in elementary school, in middle school, about reproductive justice, reproductive rights. What does it mean to have to be pro-choice? What does it mean to be pro-life? We have to start having this conversation much earlier with our children, girls and boys, and they have to understand that they have a voice in this, and it starts at the poll. It starts when you turn 18, when you have that responsibility to go out and elect people who speak for you, and elect people or select people to speak for you. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to unpack here, Chris. We're not going to be able to do it all on this call, but there's a lot of things that we have to unpack with this conversation. It's going to affect us in so many ways. We're going to have to start a whole new conversation around something that we thought we would never be discussing in 2020.
Chris, can I jump in here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. I want to touch on something that Thema said. She mentioned that 3.5 months is typically enough time for a woman to make a decision as to whether or not she would like to have an abortion. And that may be true. But I think the challenge here is that we know that many women do not find out that they're pregnant until they're 15 weeks or later on in the pregnancy, which doesn't provide for enough time. That's number one. Number two, we know that nearly 60% of the women who do receive abortions already have children. So that negates this false narrative that's being perpetuated that talks about the Black community using abortion as a birth control method. Most of the women, nearly 60%, already have children. They're choosing abortion because they either do not want to have an interruption to their education, their career, there's some sort of health risk, they don't want a growing family, there are financial challenges that they may not be able to overcome. Whatever the decision is, however, ultimately it is their choice. The other thing that I'd like to point out is that we know that when women have access to low-cost contraceptives, we see a positive impact on the general welfare of our community. And I've done a little bit of research prior to joining this conversation. And what I've learned is that from 1990, there were 1.6 million abortions in the United States. And as of 2020, that number is down to 930,000. So that is a 41% decline. 41% decline in abortion. So to say that the Black community use abortions as a means of birth control, it's offensive and it's false. It's downright, it's offensive. And the data speaks for itself. But thank you so much, Thema, for making that point.
Thank you very much, Ms. Spencer. My next question is to Ms. Rolle. Thema just mentioned how this decision that was had is going to affect us for a while. I think that Yolanda would also agree with me that this decision by the U.S. Supreme Court has now empowered state legislatures, our state legislators, the work that Yolanda does in Tallahassee, the work that all people do in Tallahassee, including Florida Rising. Your stock just went up because the legislatures have now been empowered to make decisions about your reproductive health, and they put it in these people's hands. And so, the elections that are happening this fall, the people who are running for these state legislative positions, this has become even more important. If people didn't realize before, I know everyone here probably does, but this has really increased the power of our state legislatures around this country. And we need to be very focused on those states that have a lot of Black people in them, including the 10 that I mentioned in my opening remarks. But for you, Miss Sheena, the Black community is very resilient. How do we rise up from this decision?
What I will say is, as someone who's been an organizer for almost 20 years, the way that you win, whether you are trying to get stop signs and speed bumps in your neighborhood, or whether you are, as we've done, pass Obamacare, whatever you're doing from a federal to a local level, you could synthesize that work down to 3 simple points. And I like to keep it simple because people in our communities will look at their lives and look at the many ways that they are being attacked and think, what can I do? Right? I can't even get the people at the job to treat me right. How can I change policy? I like to boil it down to 3 simple points. The first thing that we have to do is to cut through the noise of all the people who are telling us what we don't deserve and gather together with the people who believe like you, the people who know your stories and understand the importance of holding this right, and commit to each other to work together. So I like to call that congregate. You know, I told you I'm a minister, so I like to use those terms, congregate with those people who understand the gravity of this moment so that you have people to work with. The second thing I tell people, you got to educate, right? First, you have to learn about the issue. There's so many things baked into this. Florida and their 15-week ban. Well, what does that mean? Right? The fact that this isn't just about abortions, this is about privacy, right? So now if this is a privacy issue, what other things will they strip away from you if we no longer have the Supreme Court protections of privacy? This goes beyond just abortion. So just learning how these things affect you can open up the opportunity in those conversations with those people you're congregating with to see where can we go next and who do we need, whose support do we need. The other kind of education you need is sometimes you need to take time and learn the skills. So do you know how to talk to your neighbors? Do you know how to talk to your pastor and challenge some of the things that may be said in your church? Do you know how to pick up the phone and call 20 people and ask them to come out, right? A lot of times people, they just don't know what to do. And so taking the time to learn about the issue and the skills is going to position you to do something. And that's the last thing, is to take action. Now, over the last week, right, so that third part is activate. Over the last week, we have seen protests and marches and rallies, and that's really important. But I don't want anybody to think that simply showing up with a sign is organizing. It's incredibly important, but it's the least and last part that you see in the organizing process, right? And so you also can take action by joining Ms. Cash Jackson in the halls of Tallahassee and doing some grassroots lobbying, right, to our legislators. You can also be going to your city councils and county councils and seeing if they're trying to get into what level of policy locally. You should be talking to your senators. You should be talking to, you know, your people in Congress to say, since the courts won't do what we need for protection, what are you willing to do? What bills are you willing to pass to pass laws, right, that can patch up what we've lost with Roe, right? And so there are lots of different actions you can take in order to put people in the middle of the political process. What we like to do with Florida Rising is take our everyday communities, our regular Black folk, and put them in the political process, because that is what our political process in America was designed to do. Now, I will share a leak. I don't know how to share it with the general public, but that is exactly what we're doing. We're inviting people to come together and have these conversations. We're having a Roe v. Wade reproductive justice town hall where we're able to talk about these things, understand the impact of this policy, and then move people to action for the long haul, because this has been a process of death by 1,000 cuts. We're responding to the Supreme Court decision, but this ain't the first strike, right, that we've felt in this process. It's been a death by 1,000 cuts, so we will have to fight back as Black people in many different ways. We'll have to fight back in 1,000 different ways. And so the first step is to get together with other people who are doing something.
Thank you very much. Now, I think, Thema, even though I'm a man, I think I directed the traffic pretty well. Everybody had an opportunity to address the question directly. Did I do okay, Thema?
Chris, you are doing great.
So the next question is to all of you. I know we're at the beginning stages of a new wave of activism. I believe that we need to, just as a side note, we got to get these young girls involved with. And I know you all are concerned with that. You know, we got to get the younger people engaged. But what is your particular organization? If you haven't figured it out yet, and that's okay, because we are at the beginning stages. But what are some of your organizations doing to take a stand as it relates to overturning Roe v. Wade? We heard what Ms. Rolle is doing, but I'm going to start with Ms. Kerry-Ann Roars.
Well, first of all, we're working with, as Shea said earlier, our national organization, as well as each individual YWCA, has already taken a stand. We're very clear on our position, and we continue to work on a national level to educate, inform, and give pathways to others to do the same. On a local level, We're going to be working together not only to educate and to help people understand what now. What does this mean in Florida? What does the 15-week ban mean? What does it mean for me? There are lots and lots of people right now who don't even understand what just happened. They don't even understand what it means when they travel, or maybe for some of the plans that they may be having to move their families to other states because it's more affordable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people moving out of Florida because it's more affordable to go somewhere else. What do they know about their choices in that? So we're really, really leaning into education as a first means, partnering with partners such as Florida Rising and the Women's Fund to host these conversations and to make sure that we're collectively sharing information. That's also important. But thirdly, what we're really leaning our attentions to is, okay, when this happens, what are some of the things that we need to be ready for in order to change the narrative, mitigate some of the impact? What are some of the things that we need to be leaning into partners that are now going to be on the rise? How are we going to look at some of those systemic issues? As Thema said, are we going to be talking differently to our young people about their choices? Are we going to be educating differently? We always know that sex education was a big issue in schools. Big issue. Where does that live now? How do we own that? So there are some systems conversations that need to be had. We're really focused on this is really happening. What is going to be the outpouring and the impact, and how do we begin to mitigate that is a big part of my attention focus, our YWCA, our board, and our partnerships.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm imagining Ms. Spencer would co-sign everything you just said. You want to add on to what your organization is doing in order to take a public stand on the overturning of Roe versus Wade?
Yes, absolutely. Certainly echo everything that Kerry-Ann has said. And thank you, Christopher, for pulling me into the fold on this particular question. A couple of things I would add, and I believe that Sheena touched on a few of these previously. Definitely educating the youth and educating our community. I believe that's where it starts, because education is paramount and education equates to power. So we don't want to lose our power, right? If we're not familiar with the issues, if we're not familiar with our alternatives and how we can combat this sort of thing, we're going to lose every single time. The other thing that I would say is vote, vote, and vote. Super important, triple important, right? I think we need to be working towards putting people in office, preparing them and putting people in office who look like us and who understand that our choices matter. It's not about your political beliefs or your moral compass. It is about a woman's body and her right to choose. I think we need to be working towards that. That's number one. The second thing that I'll mention is that YWCA of Palm Beach County is going to be rolling out very soon the Institute for Democracy. We're coining it as the Dorothy Height Institute for Democracy, which is going to be aimed at registering voters and getting people out there to vote. It is going to be a very involved process. It's not going to be people knocking on your door asking you, are you registered to vote? Will you sign up? And I'm going to give you your form. So look out for that. We're super excited about it. And then YWCA of Palm Beach County is going to be the first in the Tri-County area and in our county to launch a transgender voting guide to really elevate the conversation when it comes to equality and to ensuring that, again, we're not losing our power. And so, again, I want everyone to look out for that. It's going to be all over the place. We're super excited about it. And I think those are the key points that we need to focus on if we want to see some change and see it soon.
Thank you very much. And I must say, I had no idea that the YWCA in South Florida and Palm Beach County were headed by extraordinary African-American women. I need to be involved. I need to know what I need to do. You know, how can I help? Send me the link to donate a little something, you know. The Thema, what is girl power? What is girl power? What are their plans in the future? Again, I know this is just happening and people are sort of getting their thoughts and activism together, but what are your thoughts on how your organization might take a stand on this important issue?
Thank you, Chris. One of the things that we've been talking about this week since this decision happened last Friday, we have an advocacy program for girls, for at-promise girls who who are referred to us through through their juvenile parole officers. And so what they have to do is they have to complete an 18-week program to help them recover their lives and get back on track. And one of the things that they do after they complete that 12 weeks is they go into an advocacy project. They learn how to advocate for girls' rights, women's rights, the rights of GLBTQ rights. So they've been in this program learning how to advocate for themselves. And hopefully Yolanda will have some girls ready to come up to Tallahassee and do some lobbying. But it's about educating girls around the topics that matter to them and topics that are going to empower them to be powerful women who can become legislators, who can become judges and police officers and presidents and vice presidents. So it's training at a very early age. And it's also about training girls who live in communities of color where people don't believe there's a lot of promise coming out of those communities. So it's about taking these girls that society has said, not her, not this one. So what we do is we work with those girls. And let me tell you, these girls are brilliant. These girls are smart. When I spoke with them yesterday, we had a focus group yesterday on this topic, and at least 2 or 3 of them could have been on this panel because they were well read, they were well versed, they knew the issue, and they had ideas and opinions. And so it's about taking these girls, training them, putting them in programs where they can learn how to harness their voices and stand on their voices because they have ideas. And we need to start listening more to girls because these girls have a lot to say about who they are and what should happen to them and their communities. And so that's what we do, Chris. That's what we've always done. We've always been advocates for girls, but now it's about teaching girls how to be advocates for themselves and how to be advocates for other girls and women.
Thank you very much. And Yolanda, I know, in your private life, you're involved with a lot of different organizations and alumni organizations. You mentor a lot of young lawyers and particularly African-American lawyers. And I know you're active in your church. What will you do to further this discussion about the impact or taking a stand against the overturning of Roe versus Wade?
We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. In my individual capacity, I certainly continue to educate, and I want to start there. We need to look and see how people vote, how people have voted in the legislature. It's all online, myfloridahouse.com. You will be surprised. I'm not calling nobody out, but you will be surprised. Everybody that's Black is not pro-choice. Everybody that's white is not pro-life. I mean, it's you need to see it's an individual information that we need to get out there because there's some misconception, and it's very, very important that we get educated on how people stand because the way they voted, it's records right there. Then the other thing is that certainly the Divine Nine has been very, very active in this space. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta and sit on our National Social Action Commission. Delta issued a statement, the Links, they issued a statement. And then I just want to say that, Black women are showing up in ways that we've never had the opportunity. It's a thing called Zoom. Any of us that are in organizations, I can tell you that I've been on Zoom calls with some of my organizations where it's 5,000 Black women on there, and we have continued that. And so I think that getting the information out is going to be even more thorough. And then we also locally, national, there was a group that started called Women Black Women. It's a collective of Black women that get together every Sunday. And that national group, and it started because of the narrative. I think Thema talked about changing narratives because of the narrative having to do with the nomination of a Black woman as vice president. and it has continued. And that group has grown. They did a full page ad in the New York Times with Ketanji Brown Jackson, and we brought that group to Florida. And so we do have a Women Black Women Florida organization. Chris, I'm sorry, you are not welcome. You're welcome to hear what we do outside, but not on the call. But no, just kidding. It is a group of Black women who are like-minded that want to change the narratives of racism and sexism and all those negative things of Black women. So people are doing things in their individual capacities to make sure that we change this narrative of what Black women are and who can control our bodies.
Thank you.
Can I jump in also, Chris? I want to add something to the conversation. We talked about voting and how important that is and what it looks like. We talked about elections, and I want to also add that elections have consequences, and we need to make sure that they are solid. I think that when we vote people into office and their butt hits the seat, if they do not deliver on their promises, that we force them out. We force them right out of that seat because, again, we're giving up our power. And I think we need to go so far as even to have a preliminary plan of how we're going to move forward when a candidate reaches office and does not do what they say that they're going to do, whether it is taxes, affordable housing, affordable childcare. We're voting this person in. We need to have at least a draft, a preliminary plan of what we're going to do to get their butts out of that seat if they do not deliver on their promises. We can't wait until they're 8 months into their term, and then we come to the realization that they're not serving us, the people, the voters, and then it takes us another 8 months to devise a plan and another 8 months for the plan to even have any sort of impact. So that would be my final point and my final addition to the conversation.
Well, thank you very much.
Chris, we have a news flash. The judge, a Florida judge, has just temporarily blocked Florida's 15-week abortion ban. You heard it first.
Well, legacy leaders. You know what I'm saying? Tune in next week for our next news flash. You know?
First.
This conversation has been fruitful. We have a few minutes left, and I'm gonna, extend the show just a little bit because of the to get everybody's closing arguments in. I do want to just make this one mention. We all have spoke about the power of voting and the fact that, elections have consequences, and we're literally living within those consequences right now. The appointment of the previous president's judicial nominees is why we are here today. But in Florida, we also have the opportunity to elect our judges. And so I would also encourage the organizations that are present to pay close attention in your respective counties to the judicial elections. We are fortunate that we actually can elect our judges. In Florida, we have a two-pronged process. It all eventually comes down to an election, but judges can be appointed by, in Florida to fulfill the remaining term of someone who was elected. And then, of course, they can be directly elected. All judges are eventually elected. And so please keep in mind in Miami-Dade and Broward and Palm Beach who those judges are, because we are here today because of the action of 9 justices. That's why we're here. We're here having this conversation, ultimately bubbling up to 9 judges making this decision. So we can elect our local judges. So I want us to pay attention to that. I'm going to allow everybody a closing statement at this time, and we're going to start with Miss Rolle in Florida Rising.
What I would say is, I know for a lot of people, this is a moment of pain. And so I don't begrudge anybody taking the time to process and to take care of yourself and what this means for you and your family. And then once you move through that personal processing, whatever your healing process is, I encourage you to get into organizing, to really find the people who believe like you do, who you can depend on to do things locally. I encourage you to learn about the issue, not by yourself, with other people. And what you learn, teach other folks. Some people are never going to go to the big town hall, but they will come to your living room and hear what you have to say. And so I encourage you to be a teacher and a learner in all ways, the things that most impact your life. And then I encourage you to take action, right? And be involved with the people who take action. You will be surprised that once you take one step, how many more steps open up to you, right? And in that process, and I will just speak as a Black woman talking to Black people, the history of this nation has been to tell us that we have no place and no voice, that we are here to be of servitude, and decisions like Roe reaffirm that your body isn't yours, it's in servitude. Your body moves the way we tell you to move it, right? And so the way that you reclaim your space and your body and your power is to move into action at your own direction. Right? Is to make sure that your voice is heard, make sure that your community is seen, make sure that your power is felt. You can do that at the polls. You can do that at the rally. You can do that in lots of ways. But I encourage you to get into action, because inaction means other people will continue to make more of these decisions for you. So I would just encourage you to get in it at whatever place you can start, and trust your community and other like-minded people to help open more pathways with you.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank all of the people who have joined us online. There have been some comments. I just want to say hello to Shatria Moore, Dorothy Bendros Mendengal, Dwight Bullard, Mr. Clark Beasley, and even Jesus is Everything, that has some very interesting comments that he's been posting up. I want to thank him for joining us as well. Closing remarks, Miss Spencer.
Yes, I just like to say that definitely stay engaged, be active, support organizations like YWCA who have been at the forefront of these critical issues for centuries, not the organizations who are now joining the conversation because it's cool, or because DEI is a thing, or because racial justice and social justice is taking off and it would look bad on them if they were not a part of the conversation. Support the organizations who have been doing the work and continue doing the work. You know, Chris, you talked about sending a link, and you're going to get a link to donate. All right, you're going to get a link today. Thank you so much. And I want to also say, be on the lookout for the Institute for Democracy. We're going to be rolling that out. And also be on the lookout for information regarding our 105th year gala. YWCA of Palm Beach County is celebrating 105 years this year. We're super excited, and we're going to be hosting a kick butt gala on December 2nd in Palm Beach County, and we want everyone there. It's going to be a lot of fun. But most importantly, the dollars raised are going to go towards programs that support our community. It will support affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable childcare, women's health, and youth empowerment, and of course, racial justice and social justice issues. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. And Miss Campbell, closing remarks.
My closing remarks are that you guys, whatever was happening, whatever you were doing last Friday before we got this news, this horrible news, is still happening. For me, at Girl Power, we know we had a housing crisis. We know that there is exploitation and trafficking of underage girls in this community. We know that Black children are still graduating from high school below grade level. We know that the foster care system still, turning out kids at the age of 18 with no place to go. So we have a lot of issues that we have to deal with. This is just one of them. And sometimes in our community, when these things happen, it knocks us off focus and we take our eye off the bigger prize. So there's a bigger problem for Black people than Roe v. Wade. I'm not saying this is not up there at the top, but we just got to make sure that we continue to focus on all those things that's important to us and our children. And for me, it is the protection and the nurturing and the advocating for girls who are our future, who when we step aside, we got 10 soldiers more fierce than we are to step in and take our place. So these things happen, and sometimes it takes the focus off of what we should really be focusing on. And I'm not saying this is not something we should focus on, but don't let this one thing take us away from the bigger picture. Black lives still matter. And so that's those are my closing remarks. Stay on mission, stay on point, work with people that you can work with on this issue. And the last thing that I want to say is, I know that I said earlier that if you have a penis, you need to be quiet on this one. And I mean that, but we need our men. We need to educate men about what this means to us as women, because I don't think they get it yet. They don't really understand how to the core of who we are when someone else think they have the right to tell us what we can and cannot do with our bodies, as if we're not smart enough or bright enough or educated enough to know when we should exercise our rights to control our own bodies. So that's it. That's my truth for today.
Thank you very much. I think Yolanda is our last person for closing remarks, or it's still got Miss Roy's as well. I think it's Yolanda's our last. Okay, Miss Jackson, you're gonna take us home, huh?
Miss Royce.
I think Kerry-Ann hasn't spoken, closed out either.
Miss Royce?
I hadn't, but I would certainly relinquish my time to Yolanda. All I will say is I'm seriously going to echo my sisters. Everything that everyone has said is so powerful, and it reminds me, 83% of us feel that this is something that we believe in, but it is not the cornerstone of who we are. And we are more alike than we're different. Speak to your neighbors, listen, because it is so critical that we're working together on these issues. But again, the economics are the cornerstone of all of this starts with economics. And we cannot take our eyes off of that. We have to move the economics so that where people live, what the color of their skin is, does not predetermine their outcomes for healthcare and for education. We have to continue to move into economics, because then this would be a non-issue, because we'd be on the plane going to wherever we needed to take care of this issue. So economics at the corner of everything, and activate. Thank you very much for having me, Chris. If I drop off, it's because my phone died.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson, you've done your closing?
No, I just say, I want to end where we started. This is a justice issue. And to Thema's point, we can't take our eye off the prize. We have been fighting social justice issues for the last few years. I mean, we've been fighting for a long time. But whether it be voting, whether it be this whole focus on parental rights and what you can say, whether you can say gay, if you can be woke, and now determining what happens with our body. All issues that have to do with our rights that this country is supposedly guaranteeing. And so we have to keep an eye on the prize, keep vigilant about the issues and the people who are talking and what they're saying. And that's my closing. And thank you for this space to have this conversation.
Well, let me tell you something. Lunch with Legacy Leaders. I always say that I'm going to eat my lunch while I'm here, but it never happens. We switched things up this week because of what's happening in the world. And I think this was spirited. I think it was informative. It was definitely informative for myself. But I also, want to say that the international response to what's been happening here in America regarding this, as I mentioned earlier, I was in England last week. I was in Portugal up until yesterday. And in preparing for this, I was looking at my notes and reading newspapers in Lisbon and reading a newspaper in London. And it's fascinating how the world is looking at what is happening here. Even in Israel, just recently, literally on Monday, they took a vote to expand their rights to reproductive justice, Ms. Jackson, because of what was happening in America. You have countries around the world that are responding to what's happening here and saying what is wrong with America. And so, there is an international feel to what is happening. When Roe versus Wade was passed adjudicated 50 years ago, it led in something, and now we're reverting back to something else. And so I want all of us to keep in mind, this is an international issue as well as a Florida issue, as well as a Miami-Dade issue. And just let's keep our consciousness and awareness above. And this is coming from, one man who just is concerned with my sisters. And whatever we can do, we want to support that. And I encourage the men in the world to understand that whatever your values are, whatever you think your values are, because even those can change. There's one thing that I think we all can agree with. There's a place for government to be, and there's a place where it should not be.
Yep.
So your personal decisions have nothing to do with where the government should be in your life. So let's keep those things separate. With that being said, thank you all very much, and I hope to see you all in person. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.